Okay guys, the time has finally come to review these two bikes. So let's start with a cheap one. This cost 2,000 euros. It's a Vitus Mythique 2022. And it's a trail bike. It's 140 millimeters in the rear. Front as well, 29er, full 29er. The bike is stock with the suspension Marzocchi and RockShox in the back. Very cheap but functional suspension. I have no quarrel, no quirks, no complaints with the suspension. Works really good out of the box. I only need to adjust the air pressure, the rebound, and you're good to go. Pretty simple. I did a few mods, but we'll get into the mods later. And geometry is pretty standard, 65 degrees, I think, 65.5 in the front. 78 or 77 C-tube angle. Wheelbase, I can't remember. It's like 1200 and something. But I love it. Okay. Now this is an enduro bike. It's not the same. Has more suspension. 160 in the rear. 180 actually in the front. And yeah, it came 180 in the front. I was quite surprised. It should be 170, but hey, I'm not complaining. It's the suspension is much beefier. It's got a 38 mil on the front compared to the 34 on the trail bike, the Vitus. It's coming some at SX 2022 as well, although it arrived in 2023. 6 months of delay, whatever. It cost 4,300. Okay, now the specs is right now. This geometry is in the high position. The low position is just way too low. High position is 64 degrees head-tube angle, 78, I guess, as well, or almost 80, the C-tube angle and whatnot. Okay, so let's go with how they ride. First, a trail bike. This ride's amazing. Exactly what you expected of a trail bike. It climbs really well. There's a little bit of bobbing. You don't have a lockout on the rear shock, but you can just slow down the rebound and it works really fine. But even without it, the bobbing is minimal. It feels efficient. Not incredibly efficient, but it feels efficient. And because it's a 29er setup and the geometry works really well, it's just like a tractor. You tractor uphill. It's a really good climber, comfortable, intuitive, very good climber. This one, it's also a pretty good climber, but not as good. In the low setting, the geometry, it's useless. Anything that is slightly steep or not a gravel road, you're going to struggle. I also got a 27 on the back. It's a mullet, so it tends to get a little bit more stuck in the back, and you have to lean forward quite a bit. And because it's not as roomy, the cockpit is quiet because of the head-tube angle. You have less space, less reach, basically. It's quite cramped. It's quite uncomfortable, actually. Only on the road is it comfortable. In the high position, it climbs well. Not as well as the other one, but it climbs really well. It might have an edge on, I don't know, when you have to, in a tight spot or whatever. I don't know. I guess if I had to choose between the two to climb, it's the other one, right? It's more comfortable and it feels more capable, I guess. But you don't buy this bike to climb, so whatever. Descending, it descends really well. If anything, it feels like it should have a longer fork, slightly longer, maybe a 150, 35 millimeter Yari, because the bike is really capable, actually. But other than that, it's really good. I love how it descends. Gives you confidence. The only bad thing is the 29er in the back. I'm a short guy, so it gets into my bum a little bit. And it's not as confidence inspiring as the other one. The other one's just a plow machine. But it descends pretty well. I have no complaints in descending, and bottom outs are quite controlled. Not a big deal. The frame doesn't flex that much, a little bit, but not too much. That's good. This one, it's way stiffer. It descends much better. Obviously, it's biased towards descending. Took it to a few enduro races, like you can see right here. and it handled everything pretty fine. I went to one of the toughest enduro races in the world, or at least in Spain, and it handled it no problem. It was me who couldn't handle the terrain. Basically, I got too tired. I was also sick, so that's fine. But I didn't crash at all. Very, very good bike. Now, which one do I prefer? I prefer that one. I prefer the Vitus, 100%. Why? Well, it's much cheaper. You know, it's half the price, but not half the performance. It's 90% as good as this one. You know, it took only 3 weeks to ship. This took 6 months. Several like delays and stuff. So very bad on commencal. Shame on commencal for that. No excuse. There's no pandemic. There's no nothing. It's just bullshit. It also came with a dent on the frame, and the front brake doesn't work very well. It squeals. It's contaminated. We cleaned the pads. We cleaned everything. I did a bunch of stuff. I even bled the front brake. It still works like shit. Oh, and it still works, but not really as it should. You know, you're expecting a lot of more brake power out of this. It brakes like it's a 120 millimeter disc up front, and it's 200. You know, and this one out of the box, everything worked fine, 100% perfect. The front brake on that one actually is more powerful than this one, which is like ridiculous, but well. Mods on the Vitus, I changed the seat post because it was too short to 150. Pija, I think it's called. And what else did I change? I changed the pedals, of course, because these are like 8 something, whatever. They're golden, they're cool. They match like kind of like the logo, bottle and everything. A bottle cage, bottle. And the MRP bash guard, which has been used heavily. I've been doing lots of trials with this bike. Lots of fun. And maybe a little bit on the stem side there, a few rings, but nothing else. Everything else is stock. Nuke-proof stuff is really good. The saddle is slightly more comfortable on the commencal though. Also changed the dropper post to 150. Came with 110 or 120 or 100 something like that. Too short. And it doesn't go all the way through the frame, whereas that one does. So another point for Vitus, you know. Some stickers and the stem. They changed the stem and the pedals, of course, the bottle cage. And the MRP bash guard hasn't been used as heavily as the other one, but it has been used. And that's it. Bunch of stickers, you know, with all my stuff. That's it, only stickers. But if I could only have one bike, I would have the gray one, 100%. It's just so much more fun. Although I could still race enduro, just not as quickly, you know. I had to be more careful. But I'm so slow anyways that compared to the pros that it doesn't bother me as much. So yeah, I'm never buying a commencal again. I'm not selling this one either. I mean, it's not a bad bike by any means. It does what it's supposed to. But if I ever have to sell this one and buy another one, I'll buy the Enduro Vitus and Vitus or Vitus or whatever you're gonna call it. Call it the day. So yeah, it's kind of surprising, man. I was expecting much more out of commencal. Oh, I also bought a rear wheel for the commencal, but it's not here. It's not installed. The spare one. Nuke-proof Horizon. Really good. Quite heavy. Other than that, is that a scratch? No. Okay, thank God. And yeah, I mean, the 38 works really well. But the suspension was so much trickier to set up on this one. I'm not used to this single pivot. And what's the difference between the single pivot and the Horsling? I think single pivot is a little bit more efficient when climbing, but it's also harsher. It's less forgiving and gives you slightly less traction. But going downhill doesn't really matter. Both perform really, really well. It's barely noticeable, honestly. And I guess there's a little bit more pedal kickback on this one than that one, especially with the other rear wheel with 100 points of engagement in the rear. But other than that, it's good. And that one has 180 millimeter discs, and it brakes better than these 200s. Same Shimano. It's just like, I don't know, it came faulty. I don't have time to, send the bike back another 6 months to wait for a brake pad. It's like, nah, fuck off. So yeah, that's all. Those are my thoughts, my review. So bye.